Welcome to you all, and we're pleased to have you join us this morning. And there may be some other visitors out here today as well. If you're new to us, if you would, find a way to introduce some people, introduce yourselves to people, or have others introduce you. We'd be glad to know who you are. For many of us, trying to craft a message from the Gospel of John is a bit of a challenge, but not for the standard reasons that the Scripture itself is particularly challenging, but the Gospel of John was originally left out of the canon of Scripture because the early church did not deem it to be an authentic account of Jesus' teaching and his life. And modern scholarship tends to lean that way as well. But that's not to say it doesn't have some value for us, because I believe that it does, because it represents an insight into an understanding for us into the development of the understanding of Jesus in the early church, because this gospel is from the late first century Greek Christian church, and it helps us to understand how they progressed in their understanding of Jesus, because in his life, and he did not fulfill what the Jews had expected from their Messiah. He failed miserably in that role because he died a very unpretentious, disgraceful death by execution. Their Messiah wasn't supposed to suffer that fate. And so they had to craft or come to a different understanding of who this man was. What did he represent? What is his meaning? What is the meaning of his life to us today? And we can look at the Gospel of John to help us understand what that was. And I think we can take away from this with a little bit of Scripture that we're looking at from John today, in that they understood Jesus and his life as being purely countercultural. That is, he defied the conventions of his days and all the cultural norms and all the things that you were supposed to do in your life as a strict observing Jew. No, you didn't do these things. You were not to be in contact with an unclean woman, for example. You were supposed to perform your daily washing ritual before you ate. You had to be in contact or in relationship with the right people who were sanctified through their own lives. Jesus defied all of that. And they came to understand, the early church did, that Jesus was teaching us to do the very same thing. And help us to understand that in doing so, that being in opposition to the norms of the day was going to cause conflict for you. And as the Scripture said, you would be hated by the world for what you do. If you don't accept the norms of the world, that you put God's law ahead of the laws of men, you're going to be hated for that. And that's true for us today. The same exists, that if you put God's law ahead of man's law, you're going to be hated for that by the world. The world is going to reject you, is going to seek to persecute you and hound you and come after you. That is certainly true for today. And we have many examples of people who have defied the ways of the world and suffered as a result. And their suffering has become the joy for many others. And the focus, of course, is on joy in our sacrifice. And is joy there. We have many examples of that. We know of the early Anabaptist martyrs, many of whom went to their deaths singing and praying and thanking God for the opportunity to stand up against the world with their faith. That's impressive. And also we have many more recent examples, too, of people who have sacrificed and suffered for the sake of the rest of us, that we have joy through their work. And of course, we know of the giants of the 1950s and 60s who worked steadily and tirelessly for the civil rights, bringing racial justice and equality in this country, particularly in the South, but also for us people in the North. We have the giants of that. We know of Martin Luther King Jr., and of course, Rosa Parks and others, so many that are nameless. But there are names also that toiled doing the same work in anonymity. We don't know about these people, but they are out there. Many sacrificed themselves for our benefit so that others might enjoy the fruit of their sacrifice. There was a woman from Detroit who was an activist in that community. Her name is Viola Liuzzo. She determined in 1965 that she needed to be in the heart of the action, so she traveled to Alabama so that she could work in voter registration and actively participate in the struggle to bring justice to African Americans in this country. She committed herself to doing that, just as she had been doing in Detroit. But she wanted to be in the heart of the action, so she went there to Birmingham. And while there, she volunteered to transport people back and forth during the march from Selma to Birmingham in 1965. And she volunteered to transport a young black male. And when she was on the road and they were going to their destination, another car pulled up alongside them. The passenger in the front pulled out a gun, opened fire, and she died. And in her sacrifice, became the only white woman to be murdered in the cause of civil rights, racial justice, in the struggle in the South. The only one. And her sacrifice, her willingness to give up her life and suffer the consequences of her dedication to a cause has become a joy for so many others through her sacrifice. And then we have people who have been heavily engaged in trying to provide economic justice to people down through the generations, through their work in the labor movement, through unionization, organization of people to fight for justice. We don't realize the benefits we have reaped from the work of so many, and so many who have sacrificed themselves for that. That we have the 40-hour work week, we have health benefits, we have vacations and holidays that we owe to all of those people who gave of themselves to make that happen for the rest of us. There was one organizer, his name was Joe Hill. He was an organizer for the Integrated or United Workers of the World, and he traveled the globe trying to find ways to help people achieve economic equality. He was hated for what he did. Because back in the early part of last century, you didn't do those things without suffering the consequences. People died for the benefits that we enjoy today. They died, and they were beaten because of the opposition. The world hated them, and their sacrifice has become a joy to so many of others. Joe Hill was framed for a murder he had no part in doing. The state of Utah, because it hated him, executed him in 1915. He gave of himself for us, and it is our joy. And then we have others. We have someone who has been a genuine inspiration in my life, who has much for the world through his activism, his speaking, his singing, and his involvement in the lives of people who are struggling. An individual who actually taught the song "We Shall Overcome" to Martin Luther King Jr., who had never heard it before. I'm talking about Pete Seeger, who I think is a giant in this country, but many people don't even know who he was. He died in 2014, just a few short years ago. But he dedicated his life to the underprivileged, to the struggle for civil rights, to the struggle for workers' rights, economic equality. That was his lifelong work. He put together a group and they built a sloop, a ship to sail up and down the Hudson River, which had become an open sewer. He did that in order to draw attention to the fact that this earth belongs to all of us, and we have a responsibility, all of us, to protect the environment. That was his life's work. He suffered as well for his work, nearly dying when his car was attacked, when he appeared at a labor rally with Paul Robeson, the great singer and actor, in which on their way out in Peekskill, New York, their car was stoned by people who lined the driveway out strictly to hurl rocks at them in an attempt to harm them, if not kill them. And his car, the windows were all broken out as well, and he suffered as a result. He wasn't particularly badly hurt. But nonetheless, it was a demonstration of how the world hates people who defy their norms, defy convention, and work on behalf of the people who are underprivileged and need it when it is against the interests of the rich and the powerful. We will be hated for that. And that is a central message, I think, of the Gospel of John in this passage that has been read for us today. That if we defy the ways of the world, we will be hated for that. And we could suffer the same fate as Jesus did. And his wish, through the writing of the author of John, is that all of his disciples join him in being the object of derision by this world. That we are hated because of what we are doing. We have a man who marches around out here on Sunday mornings who represents the world. The world hates us because of what we are, what we have determined to do by following what we understand to be the teaching of Jesus directly to us. The world has come to hate us, yet we endure. We're strengthened by that. Our suffering, if it comes, would be a joy to all of us because we are doing it in the name of all of those who need our protection, who need us to intervene on their behalf. That is our mission. And to be hated is a joy. It's a joy to all of us, something we should welcome and cherish and willingly be a part of. True, there are so many other things this congregation and this denomination could be doing. There are many things to bring attention to the fact that we will not follow the ways of the world. It's out there for us to take hold of and be a part of. That opportunity exists for us as a congregation to be part of other ways that the world will notice us and bring us hate so that we may find joy in what we do as a congregation. So many opportunities. May we all reach out and grab it. Amen.